The silent observer. Marcus Reed's weathered hands guided the mop across the polished floor of the Quantum Research Institute's main laboratory, each stroke precise and methodical. The rhythmic movement was meditative, allowing his mind to drift through complex mathematical equations while maintaining his carefully crafted facade of simplicity. 20 years of practicing ordinariness had made him an expert at being unremarkable. The institute buzzed with its usual energy, scientists rushing between laboratories, the hum of quantum computers, and the occasional flash of light from experimental chambers. Marcus observed it all through downcast eyes, his mind simultaneously processing and solving the equations he glimpsed on whiteboards as he passed. Dr. Isabella Reyes strode past him, her heels clicking against the floor he'd just cleaned. She was focused on a holographic display projecting from her tablet, showing the schematics of the Institute's pride and joy, the antimatter containment array. Marcus noticed something in the calculations scrolling past that made his heart skip a beat. A subtle error, buried in layers of complex mathematics, but one that could prove catastrophic. He continued mopping, his movements unchanged while his mind raced through the implications. The containment field's resonance frequency was off by a fraction so tiny that even the Institute's supercomputers had missed it. Given enough time, it would create a cascade failure that could vaporize half the continent. "Everything all right, Marcus?" The voice belonged to Tom Rodriguez, head of maintenance and the closest thing Marcus had to a friend. "You've been mopping that same spot for 5 minutes." Marcus straightened, offering an apologetic smile. "Sorry, just thinking about dinner." The lie came easily after years of practice. His true thoughts were calculating the exact time they had before the containment field would fail, approximately 72 hours. "Well, don't think too hard. That's what we pay the eggheads for," Tom laughed, clapping Marcus on the shoulder before walking away. Marcus resumed his work, moving through the facility like a ghost. His IQ of 375 plus wasn't just a number, it was a curse that had forced him into hiding. The last time anyone had discovered his true intelligence, he'd barely escaped being turned into a government research subject. That was 20 years ago, and he'd spent every day since then carefully maintaining his invisibility. The afternoon wore on, and Marcus watched Dr. Reyes and her team growing increasingly agitated. They were detecting anomalies in the containment field but couldn't identify the source. He heard snippets of their conversations as he emptied trash bins and cleaned windows. "The simulations show it should be stable. Run the diagnostics again. We must be missing something. The board of directors is visiting next week. We need this working perfectly." Marcus felt the weight of knowledge pressing down on him. He could solve their problem with a few simple equations, but doing so would shatter the life he'd built. He'd seen too many brilliant minds become prisoners of their own genius, trapped in government facilities or corporate think tanks. As his shift ended, Marcus changed out of his uniform in the small maintenance locker room. His small apartment waited, filled with books and hidden computers where he could be himself. But as he walked toward the exit, he passed the main research floor one last time. Dr. Reyes was still there, alone now, staring at equations that covered 3 massive digital screens. The frustration on her face was evident, and Marcus could practically see the catastrophic outcome playing out in his mind. 72 hours. Maybe less. He reached into his pocket, feeling the worn notebook he always carried. In it were solutions to some of the world's most perplexing scientific mysteries, written in a code only he could understand. Adding one more wouldn't hurt, would it? Marcus found himself walking toward Dr. Reyes's office, his heart pounding. He could leave an anonymous note, just enough to point them in the right direction without revealing himself. But as he approached, he heard voices from inside. 2 men in dark suits were speaking with her, their tones urgent. "The energy fluctuations are increasing," one said. "If this project fails, the funding goes to our facility instead." Marcus froze. Through the glass walls, he saw Dr. Reyes's face fall. The equation wasn't just about science anymore, it was about power, money, and control. Just like always. He turned away, his decision made. Tomorrow he would return to mopping floors, but tonight he had work to do. In his apartment, surrounded by his hidden treasures of knowledge, Marcus would begin writing out the solution. Not for the glory, not for recognition, but because 72 hours from now, people would die if he didn't. As he walked home through the dying light of evening, Marcus knew that maintaining his anonymity was about to become much harder. The problem wasn't just the equation, it was what the equation revealed about the nature of reality itself. And once that door was opened, there would be no closing it again. The weight of his genius had never felt heavier, but for the first time in 20 years, Marcus Reed prepared to stop hiding. Breaking point. The next morning arrived with a sense of inevitability. Marcus arrived early at the institute, his backpack containing the carefully coded solution he'd worked on all night. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, but his mind remained sharp as ever, calculating and recalculating the containment field's degradation rate. The facility hummed with unusual tension. News of the anomalies had spread, and Marcus noticed additional security personnel stationed throughout the building. As he pushed his cleaning cart past the main laboratory, he saw Dr. Reyes gesturing frantically at a group of scientists gathered around the containment field's control panel. "The fluctuations are increasing exponentially," she announced, her voice carrying through the glass walls. "We need solutions, not theories. If we can't stabilize the field in the next 48 hours, we'll have to shut down the entire project." Marcus kept his head down as he entered the lab, focusing on emptying the trash bins. His enhanced mind processed every word of their discussion, noting how they circled around the problem without seeing its core. They were brilliant scientists, all of them, but they were trapped within conventional thinking patterns. "Dr. Reyes," a new voice called out. Marcus recognized Director Harrison, the institute's administrator, entering the lab with the two men in dark suits from yesterday. "These gentlemen from the Defense Department need an update on the situation." Marcus slowed his movements, listening carefully. The mention of the Defense Department sent a chill down his spine. He'd suspected military involvement in the project, but their presence now complicated everything. "The containment field is experiencing unexpected quantum resonance issues," Dr. Reyes explained, her exhaustion evident. "We're working around the clock to identify the cause." "Perhaps," one of the suited men suggested, "it's time to consider transferring the project to our facility in Nevada. We have resources that could." "Absolutely not," Dr. Reyes interrupted. "This is my life's work. We just need more time." The tension in the room was palpable. Marcus moved to clean the windows, positioning himself closer to the conversation. Through the reflection, he watched the suited men exchange meaningful glances. "Time isn't on our side, Doctor," the second man said smoothly. "The energy readings we're detecting suggest catastrophic failure is imminent. If you can't solve this by tomorrow, we'll be forced to take control of the situation." Marcus's hand tightened on his cleaning cloth. Tomorrow. They were wrong about the timeline, but their interference could accelerate the problem. The containment field required precise calibration, heavy-handed military intervention would only hasten its collapse. As the group dispersed, Marcus noticed Dr. Reyes remaining behind, her shoulders slumped in defeat. She approached the containment field's housing, pressing her hand against the reinforced glass. The antimatter within pulsed with an ethereal blue light, beautiful and deadly. Making a decision that would change everything, Marcus reached into his backpack and withdrew the coded solution. He'd spent hours making it appear as if it had been written by someone else, using a writing style completely different from his own. With careful movements, he slipped the papers into Dr. Reyes's open laptop bag while cleaning near her workstation. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of anxiety and anticipation. Marcus watched from various vantage points as Dr. Reyes discovered the papers, her expression shifting from confusion to intense concentration. He observed her taking the solution to her team, watched them huddle around it, arguing and calculating. By afternoon, excitement had replaced despair in the main lab. Marcus caught fragments of their discussions as he worked. These calculations are incredible. Who could have? The approach is completely revolutionary. But their excitement was cut short by alarms blaring throughout the facility. Red warning lights began flashing, and Marcus's heart stopped as he realized what was happening. The Defense Department wasn't waiting for tomorrow, they were moving now. Security teams flooded the building, ordering an immediate evacuation. Through the chaos, Marcus saw Dr. Reyes fighting against guards trying to remove her from the lab. "You don't understand," she shouted. "We have the solution. We just need an hour to implement it." The suited men from earlier appeared, flanked by soldiers. The facility is now under military control. All personnel must evacuate immediately. Marcus watched in horror as they began disconnecting equipment. They didn't understand that an uncontrolled shutdown would trigger the very catastrophe they were trying to prevent. The containment field needed to be stabilized first, then carefully powered down over several hours. In that moment, Marcus Reed faced the decision he'd been avoiding for 20 years. He could walk away, disappear into the chaos, and start a new life somewhere else. It would be the safe choice, the logical choice. Instead, he set down his mop. "Stop," he said, his voice carrying an authority that made everyone freeze. "You're going to kill us all." The suited men turned to him, irritation clear on their faces. "This area is restricted. Maintenance staff. The containment field's resonance frequency is destabilizing due to a quantum harmonic effect you haven't accounted for," Marcus continued, stepping forward. "Your shutdown procedure will trigger an instantaneous collapse of the magnetic bottle. Would you like me to calculate the blast radius for you?" The room fell silent. Dr. Reyes stared at him, her mouth open in shock. The suited men exchanged glances, their hands moving toward concealed weapons. "Who are you?" Dr. Reyes whispered. Marcus smiled sadly. "I'm the janitor who's been cleaning your floors for the past 5 years." He turned to the nearest computer terminal. "And if you don't let me help right now, none of us will live to see tomorrow." The next few minutes would either mark the end of his carefully constructed life of anonymity or the end of everything within a 100-mile radius. As Marcus's fingers moved toward the keyboard, he realized that, for the first time in decades, he felt truly free. The facade was finally cracking, and beneath it, one of the greatest minds in human history prepared to emerge. The revelation. Time seemed to compress as Marcus's fingers flew across the keyboard. Lines of complex code and mathematical formulas appeared on the screen faster than anyone could read them. The soldiers stood frozen, weapons half-raised, while Dr. Reyes watched in astonishment as equations she'd struggled with for months were solved in seconds. "This is impossible," one of the suited men muttered, reaching for his phone. "Get me director." "Quiet," Dr. Reyes commanded, her eyes fixed on the screen. "Let him work." The containment field's housing pulsed with increasingly erratic bursts of blue light. Warning klaxons continued to blare throughout the facility, but Marcus tuned them out, his mind operating on multiple levels simultaneously. One part focused on stabilizing the field, another calculated quantum probability matrices, while a third planned his inevitable escape route. "The resonance cascade has already begun," he announced, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "We have exactly 8 minutes before total collapse. Dr. Reyes, I need you at the secondary terminal. The rest of you, step back." To his surprise, Dr. Reyes complied immediately, moving to the adjacent workstation. "What do you need?" "Watch these values. When the alpha sequence reaches critical, initiate the dampening protocol I'm uploading now." Marcus's hands never stopped moving. "And Isabella? Don't blink." The next 7 minutes became a blur of synchronized action. Marcus and Dr. Reyes worked in perfect harmony, their terminals displaying a dance of numbers and symbols that looked like gibberish to the observers but represented the most advanced physics calculations ever attempted. "Alpha sequence approaching critical," Dr. Reyes announced, her voice tense. Marcus nodded, making microscopic adjustments to the containment field's quantum structure. Initiating final sequence. Dampening protocol in 3, 2, 1. Dr. Reyes pressed the execute command. For a terrifying moment, the blue light of the containment field flared blindingly bright. Several soldiers raised their arms to shield their eyes. Then, gradually, the light stabilized. The warning klaxons fell silent. On the monitoring screens, all indicators returned to normal ranges. The silence that followed was deafening. "It's done," Marcus said quietly, stepping back from the terminal. "The field is stable. I've also corrected the underlying design flaw and implemented new safety protocols. It won't destabilize again." Dr. Reyes stared at him, then at the screens displaying his calculations. This is beyond anything I've ever seen. The mathematical framework alone is decades ahead of current theory. Who are you really?" Before Marcus could respond, the suited men recovered from their shock. "Secure him," one ordered, and soldiers moved forward with handcuffs. "That would be unwise," a new voice announced from the doorway. Everyone turned to see a tall figure enter the lab. Her silvery skin and elongated features marked her as non-human. A Centaurian observer. "Ambassador Lyra," one of the suited men stammered. "This is a classified facility, which has just produced the most significant quantum physics breakthrough in the history of your species," the Centaurian interrupted smoothly. "We've been monitoring the situation. Your containment field's instability was detectable from orbit." She turned her iridescent eyes to Marcus. "We suspected there might be hidden mines of significance on Earth, but you've exceeded our estimates. Your solution to the quantum resonance cascade problem is elegant." Marcus met her gaze steadily. After 20 years of hiding his intelligence, there was something oddly relieving about being seen for what he truly was. The solution was there all along. Someone just needed to look at it differently. Indeed. Ambassador Lyra turned to the military personnel. "This man is now under Centaurian protection. The Treaty of Alpha Centauri, Section 7, allows us to claim jurisdiction over individuals demonstrating exceptional scientific advancement." The suited men exchanged glances. Everyone knew the treaty she referenced. It had been instrumental in establishing peaceful relations with the Centaurians 5 years ago. Breaking it would cause an interstellar diplomatic crisis. "That's assuming he wants your protection," Dr. Reyes interjected, surprising everyone. She stepped forward, positioning herself between Marcus and the others. "Maybe he has reasons for staying hidden. Maybe we should ask what he wants." Marcus felt a surge of gratitude toward her. In the chaos of the moment, she alone had thought to consider his wishes. Ambassador Lyra inclined her head. "Of course. Marcus Reed, you have choices now. The Centaurian Science Academy would welcome you. Your mind could help unlock mysteries that have puzzled our greatest thinkers for centuries. Or, one of the suited men cut in, you could serve your own species. The Defense Department has facilities. Or, Dr. Reyes interrupted, you could stay here, with proper recognition and resources. No more hiding." Marcus looked around the lab, at the soldiers with their weapons, the government men with their secrets, the alien ambassador with her offers of advancement, and Dr. Reyes with her unexpected advocacy. His carefully constructed world had shattered, but from the fragments, new possibilities were emerging. "What I want," he said slowly, "is to stop pretending to be less than I am. But I won't be controlled, not by Earth's governments, and not by Centaurian interests." He turned to Dr. Reyes. "I'll stay here, but on my terms. No military oversight. No secret projects. Just pure research, shared openly with both humans and Centaurians." Ambassador Lyra's expression shifted to what might have been a smile. "Fascinating. You continue to exceed expectations." The suited men looked like they wanted to object, but the presence of the Centaurian ambassador had effectively tied their hands. They couldn't risk an interstellar incident. "This isn't over," one warned quietly. "No," Marcus agreed, "it's just beginning." As the military personnel reluctantly withdrew and discussions about his future began, Marcus felt the weight of 20 years of secrecy lifting from his shoulders. But new weights were already settling in their place: responsibility, expectation, and the knowledge that his life would never be simple again. The universe had just gotten a lot more complicated, and a lot more interesting. Galactic implications. The weeks following Marcus's revelation transformed the Quantum Research Institute. His former cleaning cart sat abandoned in a corner of what was now his private laboratory, a reminder of simpler times. The facility hummed with new energy as teams of human and Centaurian scientists worked together, all orbiting around the quiet genius who had emerged from anonymity. Marcus stood at his quantum interface terminal, manipulating complex holographic equations that floated in the air around him. He designed the interface himself, allowing his mind to work at its natural speed without being constrained by traditional input methods. "You're seeing it too, aren't you?" Dr. Reyes asked, entering the lab. Over the past weeks, she'd become his closest collaborator, her own brilliant mind complementing his in unexpected ways. "The pattern in the quantum foam?" Marcus nodded, expanding a section of the holographic display. "It's not random. There's a structure underlying spacetime itself. A structure that could revolutionize interstellar travel," Ambassador Lyra added, gliding into the room. She'd taken to spending more time at the Institute, though Marcus suspected her interests went beyond purely scientific curiosity. The patterns they'd discovered had emerged from Marcus's work on the containment field. What started as a solution to prevent catastrophic failure had led to insights into the fundamental nature of reality itself. The implications were staggering. "With this understanding, we could create stable wormholes," Marcus explained, his hands dancing through the holographic equations. "Not just bridges through space, but precise corridors through the quantum framework itself. Which is exactly why this research needs to be classified," a new voice interrupted. Director Harrison entered with a group of government officials, including some faces Marcus didn't recognize. "The military applications are not our concern," Marcus cut him off firmly. "This knowledge belongs to everyone. That was our agreement." The tension in the room crackled. Marcus had insisted on complete transparency as a condition of his cooperation, but he knew certain factions were unhappy with this arrangement. The power to revolutionize space travel was too tempting for some to resist. "Mr. Reed," one of the officials began, "surely you understand the need for discretion. Other nations are already aware of our work," Ambassador Lyra interrupted smoothly. "The Centaurian Council has shared this research with all our allied species. Humanity's contribution has been properly credited." The officials' faces darkened. Being outmaneuvered by alien diplomacy clearly wasn't part of their plan. Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. But these weren't the containment field warnings from weeks ago, these were security alerts. "We have a breach in Sector 7, the facility's AI announced. Unknown energy signatures detected." Marcus's mind instantly calculated the possibilities. Sector 7 housed the prototype quantum corridor they'd been developing, an experimental setup for testing their theories about spacetime structure. "It's starting," he said quietly, more to himself than the others. "What's starting?" Dr. Reyes asked, but Marcus was already moving, his fingers flying over the nearest terminal. Security camera feeds appeared on the lab's main screen. The images showed chaos in Sector 7, tears in reality itself, swimming with impossible colors. Through these rifts, figures were emerging. They weren't human, nor were they Centaurian. "The Nexus," Ambassador Lyra whispered, her silvery skin paling further. "They weren't supposed to know." "Who are they?" Harrison demanded. "A coalition of species who believe they alone should control interstellar travel technology," Lyra explained quickly. They've maintained their power through monopoly of certain quantum technologies. Your breakthrough threatens that monopoly. Marcus watched the feeds intently. They didn't come through conventional space. They're using our own quantum corridor research to breach our reality. His mind was already racing ahead, seeing the patterns, calculating possibilities. Can you stop them? Dr. Reyes asked. No, Marcus replied, his fingers never stopping their dance across the interface. But I can do something better. I can turn their own technology against them. Understanding dawned in Ambassador Lyra's eyes. You're going to use their breach to access their network of corridors. Exactly. They've inadvertently given us a direct link to their quantum infrastructure. Marcus's mind operated at full capacity now, processing variables faster than any computer. Dr. Reyes, I need you at the primary containment controls. Ambassador, your knowledge of their systems could be crucial. The government officials looked lost. This is clearly a military situation, one began. We need to evacuate and let our forces. Your weapons would be useless, Lyra cut him off. This is a quantum incursion. Only someone who understands the underlying mathematics of reality itself can counter it. As if to emphasize her point, more rifts were appearing throughout the facility. Reality itself seemed to be unraveling around them. Marcus smiled slightly. Good thing you have a janitor who understands quantum mathematics. His hands flew across the interface, weaving equations into reality itself. The patterns he discovered weren't just abstract mathematics, they were the source code of the universe. And now, facing an interdimensional invasion, he was about to rewrite that code. The next few hours would determine not just his fate, but potentially the course of human development among the stars. As equations of impossible complexity flowed from his mind, Marcus reflected that he'd spent 20 years hiding his gift to avoid exactly this kind of situation. But now that he was here, he wouldn't have it any other way. Legacy of the mind. Reality itself trembled as Marcus Reed, former janitor and newly revealed genius, faced the greatest challenge of his existence. The Quantum Research Institute had become a battleground where the laws of physics themselves were weapons, and the future of humanity hung in the balance. Multiple quantum rifts pulsed with otherworldly energy as the Nexus forces continued their incursion. Through the tears in spacetime, their ships were visible, massive structures that seemed to defy conventional geometry, hovering in a dimension just adjacent to our own. Their quantum network is vast, Marcus announced, his hands moving through the holographic interface he'd created. They've built corridors throughout the galaxy, controlling all major transit points between civilizations. Dr. Reyes monitored the containment field readings, which Marcus was now using to stabilize local spacetime. How are we going to counter an entire network? By understanding something they don't, Marcus replied, a slight smile playing at his lips. They built their network through trial and error over centuries. But I can see the underlying pattern, the mathematical structure that makes it all possible. Ambassador Lyra watched him work with undisguised amazement. You're not just planning to repel them. You're going to reprogram their entire network. Impossible, one of the Nexus commanders shouted through a communication rift. Their form was difficult for human eyes to process, shifting between states of matter. Our network took millennia to construct. One mind cannot comprehend its complexity. Marcus didn't bother looking up from his work. Your network is beautiful, he said, fingers dancing through quantum equations. But it's built on a fundamental misunderstanding of spatial geometry. You've created something incredible, but you don't truly understand how it works. More rifts were appearing now, but they were different, controlled, structured according to Marcus's calculations. Through them, they could see other worlds, other stations, the entire Nexus network laid bare. What are you doing? The Nexus commander demanded, their voice distorting with what might have been fear. Democratizing the galaxy, Marcus replied. His mind operated on multiple levels simultaneously, rewriting the quantum architecture of the network while maintaining their local reality bubble. Your monopoly on interstellar travel ends today. Dr. Reyes gasped as new equations appeared on her screen. These calculations, they're not just about transportation. This is a fundamental revision of how we understand space itself. The universe isn't as rigid as we thought, Marcus explained, even as his consciousness extended through the quantum corridors. Reality is more like a programming language. Once you understand the syntax, you can write new functions. The Nexus forces began to retreat, their invasion turning to panic as they realized the extent of what was happening. Their carefully controlled network was being transformed, its exclusive protocols replaced with universal access codes that any sufficiently advanced civilization could use. "You don't understand what you're doing," the commander pleaded. "The power balance between civilizations will have to be based on cooperation rather than controlled access," Ambassador Lyra interrupted, her silver eyes shining with something like hope. "As it should have been from the beginning." The transformation took hours, during which Marcus's mind touched regions of space humans had never dreamed of. He saw worlds orbiting distant suns, civilizations rising and falling, the vast tapestry of galactic life all connected by the quantum corridors he was reprogramming. Finally, as the last calculations fell into place, the rifts began to seal. The Nexus forces had fully retreated, their monopoly broken, their power structure fundamentally altered in the space of a day. Marcus stepped back from the interface, exhausted but satisfied. "It's done. The network is now open source, so to speak. Any civilization with sufficient understanding of quantum mechanics can access it safely." "You've changed everything," Dr. Reyes whispered, looking through the last remaining rift at the stars beyond. "The galaxy will never be the same." "Which means our work is just beginning," Marcus replied, already turning to a new set of equations. "Humanity needs to be ready. We have a lot to learn, and even more to contribute." Ambassador Lyra approached him, her expression solemn. "The Centaurian Science Academy's offer still stands. You would have unlimited resources, the finest minds in the galaxy to work with." "Thank you," Marcus interrupted gently, "but my place is here." He gestured to the institute, to Dr. Reyes, to the facility that had been his home for so many years. Humanity is about to take its first real steps into the galactic community. They'll need guides who understand both the science and the importance of using it wisely. The government officials who had been watching in stunned silence finally found their voice. "Mr. Reed, we'll need to discuss the national security implications of." "No," Marcus said simply. "We'll need to discuss how to prepare humanity for its new role in the galaxy. The time for secrets is over. We either move forward together, or we don't move forward at all." As the sun set outside the institute's windows, Marcus looked around at the facility where he'd spent so many years pretending to be less than he was. The mop still stood in the corner of his lab, a reminder of his past life. But the future beckoned, bright with possibility. He'd gone from hiding his genius to using it to reshape the galaxy itself. Yet somehow, the most revolutionary thing he'd done was simply deciding to stop pretending, to be fully and unapologetically himself. As new equations danced in his mind, solutions to problems humanity hadn't even encountered yet, Marcus smiled. The universe was vast and full of wonders, and now, finally, everyone would have the chance to explore it together. Sometimes the greatest revelations came from the most unlikely places. Sometimes a janitor could change the course of galactic history. And sometimes, the simple act of being oneself was the most powerful force in the universe.